Today's session, we're going to cover the reason for the Democracy Mind course. We're going to unpack what the course is actually going to look like, what the different modules will include. Nigel and Scott are going to introduce themselves and share a little bit about their background and why they're passionate about this topic. We're going to look at the flow of the 11 weeks of material. And finally, there's going to be a Q&A. So I wanted to pass over to you, Nigel, just to share a little bit about the reason for this course.
And we will record, so you might want to push the record.
Yeah, I have. Yep.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, so I mean, this course is really about meeting the political climate that we're in at the moment, which is social and political crisis, called polycrisis. We're living in a period in history where we're richer, more knowledgeable, there's more opportunity than we've ever had before, and yet we seem to be destroying the world around us through both ecological privation, but also political conflict and movement into autocracies and away from democracies, human rights violations around the world, cost of living. So, the bottleneck of wealth is getting smaller and narrower. So, a series of crises that are occurring that seem totally incongruent to where we're at in terms of our knowledge and understanding. So what we're doing here is building a course that helps us both ask the questions and provide some answers as to what's required to right this ship, what's required to reorganize in a way that works for the species. And as we say there, we've created this world, and so we can create a better one. Democracy mind values curiosity over certainty. So we're really taking the attitude of not knowing into the future. How do we work together? How do we collaborate to really kind of explore the kind of world that we need to create if we're going to have something for our grandchildren? We create dialogue over dominance. So power and control is not something that we're seeking, but rather communication and collaborative conversation. Democracy over dictatorship, giving people the opportunity to participate in the world in a meaningful way rather than a tokenistic way, so that we create a culture of service, of caring for each other, of providing for each other. And we're really providing a practical course which is helping people envisage, what's actually involved. What will this look like? What do we need to understand in order to make this real?
Yeah, and I think, to us, one of the most interesting elements of this course is essentially we are trying to merge together two fields which are very often kept apart. The field of psychology on the one hand, mental health, things of that nature, and politics on the other hand, and trying to create an understanding and a foundational basis for uh, understanding the links between the states of our consciousness, the states of our minds, the states of our psychology, and how we view the world and how we live in the world, and ultimately how we vote, and what sort of vision we have for the planet now going on into the future. And so this is very much a course about um, exploring not just the contemporary reality of the world, which I think anyone watching this knows is highly problematic in countless ways, but most importantly, how to move forward towards something far better than we've ever experienced before. And using the negativity of the present moment as as fuel for having uh, a deep and widespread exploration of what could possibly come next. What could humanity actually end up creating in political terms, in societal terms, learning from past experiences by combining the fields of psychology and politics and pushing things towards, humanity basically reaching its true potential. We have come nowhere near this in the entire history of the human race over the past 300,000 years. What would it actually take to build a world that is not essentially predicated on division, and which is embodied by the existence of 195 nation states, towards something that's much more premised on the commonalities that we all share as humans. The fact that we all live on the same planet, the fact that we're all essentially biologically the same, that we have the same wishes and needs. How do we convert that into a political arrangement such that everyone everywhere benefits, has more prosperity, has more freedom, has more human rights protected, has more security than we do today? We're living in a world that is as imperfect as it could possibly be in countless ways. We have made so much progress in so many fields, of course, and we fully acknowledge that, but we have so much further to go. And
It's
whether
it's
it's
so interesting, isn't it, Scott, that you know, the psychology that we have today is really 40 years old. Our understanding of PTSD, of trauma, is something that only emerged in the 1980s. Our understanding of the way the brain actually operates and emerges is been available for the last 20 or so years. These new kind of, fields like psychedelic assisted therapy that's really causing us to think about how the mind and the brain are organized, are so new to us. And so we're only just starting to understand how to create the conditions to nurture the optimization that you're speaking to. What a different economy it would be if we looked at the 8 billion brains that are on the planet and said to ourselves, how do we optimize each one of these? What a resource rich pool that would be, that every child born on the planet gets to live to their full potential. And we culturally, globally support that. I mean, the richness of that is immense.
Yeah, absolutely. And throughout the course, we're going to ask, broad questions about not just where we're at, but where we can go to. And we will explore things such as, why is it that we are so tied to the nation state in which we were born or in which we have citizenship or nationality? What is it that prevents us from seeing more broadly than just that perspective, the country in which you live or in which you are associated with? Why is it so difficult to look beyond the borders and see others in other countries as much as equals as those with whom you share the same citizenship? Questions of that nature. And then we will expand it much further, looking at what is it a practical idea to once and for all try to implement an ancient idea that all of us living on this planet could possibly have the very same nationality as everyone else, and create a system of global governance which is completely democratic in nature and which sets up institutions and processes which prevent so many of the phenomena which are occurring in the world today from pushing us backwards, whether it's environmental destruction or democratic institution destruction, the growth of autocracy, ever worsening climate change, expanding nuclear weapons production, and so many other problems. Can we think of ways to unify the human race, not just in our minds, but in our politics and in our laws and in our practices and in our policies, so that we build a shared planet which is far more equal, far more fair than it is today? And these are not pipe dreams. This is not esoteric thinking. This is not some sort of impossible dream. We're going to be talking about a lot of practical ways in which we can move things in the direction. And I should just say, generally speaking, we are a lot closer to this than most people realize. There are many, many, many instances of very real political and other institutional frameworks in place today, which bring us far closer to that ultimate destination than most people realize. And whether we're talking about international law, whether we're talking about the International Criminal Court, whether we're talking about the globalization of culture and markets and trade and the existence of alliances of countries where countries voluntarily renounce a small portion of their sovereignty in the interest of joining with others, such as the European Union, the list goes on. So we're going to explore all of these things and show quite clearly that we're a lot closer than many people think. We still have a ways to go, but the foundations are being built and are there, and we can move more and more in this direction in a way that benefits everybody ultimately.
So that's a live and recorded session. So we're really going to focus on the live work in this first iteration. So starting on October 8, running till December the 17th, 2 hours on a Thursday evening, Australian and Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be presenting a series of topics which will involve some presentation, but also some activity and discussion to really bring home these two processes that Scott's talking about, politics and psychology, and how they can combine to help us transform the world in which we live. Next, please, Jordan. So just a little bit about myself. I'm Director of Integrative Psychology and Medicine. I've been involved in 40 years now of psychology, human development, contemplative practices, worked on developing attachment treatment models, psychedelic integration, lots of non-ordinary state work. I've been involved in a lot of institutional work over the years, and I'm also a practiced meditator. Thanks, Jordan.
Well, yeah, I hate to say it too, but we're talking 40 years now of work all around the world. I'm an international human rights lawyer. I've worked indeed in more than 80 countries, worked in a lot of war zones and disaster zones and slums, and worked often with the UN and other places. I've founded several different international non-governmental organizations. Still the director and founder of two current one's called Displacement Solutions, the other's called Oneness World Foundation. I write a lot of books and increasingly involved in making films. In addition to all the legal and other human rights books that I've written over the years, and I teach law school sometimes as well. I now write novels, and so I've just published my first novel, which is all about the quest to find a way to reduce the impact of billionaires on the planet. And the second one, which is coming out in November, is all about trying to get rid of dictators from planet Earth and autocracies and how we do that in a fictional world. I've also been part of a whole series of initiatives to create new international legal standards under international human rights law, and I've been a regular advisor to many different UN agencies. And one of my philanthropic activities is the One House, One Family at a Time project in Bangladesh, where we raise private funds from whoever wants to donate. And when we have enough, we give it to our partners in Chittagong, Bangladesh, and build houses, lifelong houses for climate displaced families there. And we're up to around 20 or 25 houses so far that are given to people for life in safe, climate safe locations away from where they're currently living as displaced families. That's a few things about me.
Thanks, Scott. But the course takes on four large sweeps. So initially, we introduce it by talking about engagement in the evolutionary process. So we start thinking about what politics are, and what's required to move into a more mature global politics. And then we start to look at the origins and obstacles of world citizenship. So we run through the whole historical process of politics from the ancient world up till now, and start to really drill into, Earth as a shared home, and understanding why we're doing such a terrible job of holding the thing that provides life for us all, the planet around us. We look then at the idea of psychology and politics, and how they've evolved in civilization. We're a species that's been on the planet somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 years, and we've been doing this cultural thing, or this civilization thing, I should say, for about 15 or 20,000 years. So it's all pretty new in our evolutionary history. We're still trying to work out how to best manage it. And then we look at finally how close we are to world citizenship. And as Scott says, it's actually not that far away. If we look at the way that Ilya Prigogine, the Nobel Prize winner physics for his discovery of chaos theory, he talks about dissipation, the way that energy loses a system as a system starts to deteriorate, as a precursor to a higher order reorganization. So chaotic systems seem to be collapsing, but then they suddenly reintegrate, and that can happen very, very suddenly. And I guess that's the kind of the hopeful tone that we're suggesting, is that when a system is injected with more energy, and when we're talking about politics and psychology, the energy we're talking about is human will. If enough people put in enough energy, that then creates the possibility for higher order reorganization. And that can happen in the course of a generation or two. It is not a long-term change process. If we understand this relationship with evolutionary psychology and politics, if we can get that formula right. Next, thanks, Gertrude. Then we move into discussion of how do we work, the psychology of the mind, how the mind works as a meaning maker, creating regulation and coherence. We look at the politics of the actual the nature of a world based on world citizenship. What would it look like? How would it work? And there's significant amount of work that's been done on this. And, this is one of Scott's levels of expertise, to really drill down into the detail. And there are a lot of people around the world who have a lot of strong knowledge about the mechanics of world citizenship. We then look at what's wrong with us. Why? Why is our psychology impeding us? Why are we not taking these giant leaps into the future with all the knowledge that's available to us? Why are we impeded psychologically? And then we'll move into 25 things you can do to facilitate world citizenship, actual pragmatic, task-based things that can be done right now, tomorrow, today, to start a process of building this energy to create this level of change and shift. Thanks, Jordan. And then we're moving into democracy as an evolutionary destination. We're looking at really at how our understanding of our minds, of our brains, are really making evolution inevitable if we can preserve the planet in which we're operating right now. And that's the race that we're all participating in. And then we're looking at the integration of psychology and politics, really bringing these great human traditions together. Politics and its thousands of years of history, and psychology in the West of its 150 years. That's it. The whole of human history, we've been looking at psychology for only a century and a half. And then we come into living democracy, mind life. What does it really look like? What does our world look like when we're doing things that are collaborative, that are caring for each other, that are reflective, that are equitable, that are essentially democratic? What does that world look like? Thanks, Sean. So just open it up to any questions that people might have. Um,
Yeah, so feel free to type into the chat if you've got any questions. In the meantime, I'd love to just ask you both, Nigel and Scott. So who do you think this course is for? Like, clearly these are important topics. I'm also aware these are like big picture questions here. We're not playing it small. We're being quite ambitious in and audacious even in the scope of this course. So, who do you see as the sort of, you know, the ideal person to participate in this course?
Anyone that doesn't want to see the planet die.
Yeah, that's right. Pretty much everyone, really, you could say. But I think there are elements of it that would be of interest to, you know, hardcore activists who are already living an activist life, who are already engaged in whatever environmental struggles or indigenous struggles or human rights struggles around the world. Anybody who's interested in the progressive side of law and the creative development of new ways of building structures. Ordinary people that aren't even necessarily involved in those types of things, who just go to work every day and come home and try to put food on the table for their kids and their partners. To see that
Therapists who are
these,
bored with psychology as endless pathology, that
right?
that want to see psychology as something that has social value as well as keeping people alive, and obviously there's importance in managing people's well-being, but there's so much more that psychology can offer us, so much
Yeah,
more that
that's right.
we can apply to optimization. The reason of the course will be available as a recorded package as well. Once we've completed the 11 weeks. So if you can't join us in person, yeah, you're more than welcome to um, um, get a perennial on recorded version.
Yeah, and we want to make this as interactive a course as possible. So any questions or concerns or points of view that people want to put forward, we will be encouraging that throughout. And, there's a lot of challenging issues that we're going to deal with, not just the broader ones of the merger of psychology and politics, but if we focus just on some of the political ones, is it really a good idea to have a global government in place that could potentially be taken over by a dictator? I mean, that's the concern of many people. Is it really a good idea to have a world parliament, even if national parliaments don't really work very effectively? Is it technologically possible to vote globally using our iPhones or other forms of technology? And the list goes on. We'll be exploring like many, many, many of those types of issues. And at its core, really, there's no question about the fact that democracy as a form of government is under threat today in the world. There's a minority of people alive this minute who live in a healthy, functioning democracy. And that number is declining. It is not increasing. And we need to do whatever we can, as flawed as democratic systems may be. As the old adage says, they're far better than all the other options.
That's the psychological opportunity, isn't it, Scott, to bring a deeper level of understanding into a democratic process, so that we start to really understand what's required of a human mind to really optimize, to get the most out of, and to participate the best into a process like democracy. What kind of world we live in when we're actually going to the ballot box and voting for clear sociopathic, narcissistic, disorganized individuals. Not that I want to name anyone specifically. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Um, what's going on in our education system that we think it's okay to give ultimate power and control to people who are demonstrably unwell? We're not educating the population around what healthy minds look like, how they need to be supported, and what their potential is.
Thanks, guys. So we've got another question in the chat here, which I think is a really interesting one. And it is, why is it that people do something wrong which may even hurt themselves mentally or physically, but they still do when they, despite knowing the consequences. And I think that's actually is a question we do see that sort of thing playing out politically, where there's sorts of actions which are damaging ultimately to one's own group, but people kind of go ahead and do it anyway, despite history telling us that we shouldn't. So what's going on there, guys?
You see that in all psychological presentation. It's the same on a micro level. It's the same when people picking the wrong partner over and over and going through a process that way. The way that our brain operates is that it accumulates enough information to live and to survive in the first 6 or 7 years of life. And unless we make some kind of intervention and choice and decision later in life, we're likely that pattern that's been established in childhood, according to our interaction with our environment, will perpetuate. So when we've grown up in traumatic and impoverished circumstances, if we don't correct, then we're choosing to do it. It's the way the human brain works to seek familiar patterns. The human brain's a predictor, so whatever's established early on will tend to seek to replicate until, and this is the interesting thing about neuroplasticity that's been around for a quarter of a century in the whole of human history, or our understanding of neuroplasticity, we can shift and we can change those neural pathways, but not without significant effort, because the pattern prediction the brain experiences as survival. We do anything different, we're threatening ourselves. So we keep doing these things that are harmful to us.
And politicians globally are very adept at using fear as a motivator. And if one is fearful of the future, one is fearful of their neighbor, one is fearful of whatever it may be, very easily can they be urged and successfully urged to vote for political parties and particular politicians who have policies that are directly against the interests of the person voting for that particular party or person. And that's a staggering thing, but it does happen all the time, continues to happen in a number of countries. But do also remember, and it's important to point this out, a couple of points. First of all, if you believe in democracy, you have to also be able to accept that you're not always going to win. Sometimes you're going to lose and the other guys are going to win. And that's the price we pay for living in a democratic system. Those who favor autocracy don't see the world that way necessarily. They want their side to win and only their side to win. And there are plenty of examples of the world right now of systems and movements being created to ensure that that's the eventual outcome. And whether that is beneficial to that particular country or the supporters of that particular regime, it's very clear that that's not the way it's going to play itself out. So it's this merger again of how one views the world, which is a reflection of one's own state of mind, that converts into one's political views and points of view. And what we're also, besides all of the analysis we'll do on those issues, what we really want to point out is the simple fact that, as many people have said, if you can say it and if you can think it, you can make it happen. But you have to say it first, and you have to see a vision of what you want to achieve and strive for. And so, our preferred option, obviously, is preservation of life on this single planet in a manner that benefits everybody all the time. And we believe that is best done by greater and greater levels of unity and collaboration and cooperation, and how we build those mechanisms to facilitate that. It's important to remember, less than 10% of the entire human race has ever sat on an airplane before. So if you're living in a Western wealthy country, you just presume that everybody is flying around all the time. Well, that's not the reality of planet Earth. And that we can give many other examples of that, this deep inequality that exists. And, as far as we're concerned, humans are humans wherever they are. And, building a society that is a reflection of that is a far more desirable one than the ones we've built thus far.
So,
Thanks, Scott.
so if I'm on, thinking about participating in this course and I'm a bit on the fence, what am I going to get out of it? Like, how do you think my life is going to be different after participating in this course? What's the shift going to be like?
What we're trying to do is really articulate very clearly um, just what is required to educate the the population about the utility of psychology to optimize our political kind of processes. How, as Scott was pointing to before, the role of fear, which is, a very ancient part of our brain and a very primitive organizing principle in our brain, which really needs to be down-regulated before we can do anything more human and reflective. So what do we need to do to create a safe world, a predictable world, a stable world, a collaborative world? We have what we need to understand about the way the brain works, the way the mind works. Once we start to really educate the population about how this can be applied, then we've got a pathway to then articulating that into a political system. And so we're really this course is all about laying down the foundations of these developmental principles. What we need as a community to evolve, and we'll give you full detail about what both Scott and I from our different perspectives and our different histories, and your contribution as well, Jordan, into an understanding of just how close we are to really significant and meaningful change. We'll outline that. We'll provide you with the details of that.
Yeah, all of us, every single human alive has the capacity to grow and evolve. And in many respects, that is ultimately the function of life, to continue to keep growing and keep evolving and keep learning more and keep understanding things more deeply. Metaphorically, hopefully this course will be the ladder that allows you to climb higher and higher and thus see more and more of the world around you. And the more, the more rungs you climb up that ladder, the more you see. And the more you also see that you are part of everything else, and everything else is a part of you. And everything, everywhere, all the time is connected to everything, everywhere else. And when you have that way of viewing the world, it's much more difficult to support bombing civilians, for instance, or polluting without restraint and ruining the biosphere in the process, or whatever the case may be. When you see that, your own direct actions and those of your own government or others are harming fellow human beings, it's much harder to support that when you have a broader view of the planet as a whole. And whether we want to believe it or not, as far as we know, we are it in the universe. This is the sole place where life happens right now. It might have happened somewhere else, and it might happen again in the future. But as far as we know, there's 2 trillion galaxies out there that we know about, and this is the only place where life exists. And if the stakes are that high, we very much hope that people will get ideas and strategies how to play a positive role in preserving and protecting and improving that life. And ultimately, that's what it's all about.
So, as you're talking, it's making me think about how, in psychology, there's different sorts of models of development that people, move from egocentric, caring about myself, to ethnocentric, caring about me and my group, to like world-centric, caring about everyone. And there's also another body of literature that looks at transcendent experiences where someone's sense of self goes beyond the normal boundaries. And I guess I wanted to just get personal with you guys for a moment and just ask, was there anything in your own lives, any kind of aha moments, any periods in of life where you kind of saw the relationship between human consciousness and politics, where that sort of the intersection between those two things became a little bit clearer, and this sort of the interconnectedness of our species, like were there particular books or professional experiences or personal experiences? Is there anything that you'd feel to share?
Nigel, you want to go first on that one?
You can go, Scott, if you've got something there.
Well, I mean, it's hard to identify a particular moment per se. It's been 1,001 different moments, but certainly, the for whatever reason, I had this overwhelming urge to travel the world at a very young age, even though my family was very much not into that sort of reality. And then that quickly morphed into, well, it sure would be nice if, human rights violations didn't exist in all these different places. And then I decided to be human rights guy because you could potentially positively affect the lives of more people in more places, choosing that particular route of action. And then, the more one meets people from countries around the world, more one travels, the more you see and can identify the forces that are behind the evil stuff that happens. All of that kind of, plays its role um wanting oneself to be an active player in making the world a better place and not accepting injustice. And I always had that too, built in from a very young age, even down to my own, like, I just wrote my memoirs, so I've really been thinking about this, just like childhood events on the playground, at age 3, where some big bully kid took my truck, my Tonka truck at the sandbox, And that was like my first memory of like total injustice. Like, how could this happen? And it always stuck with me. And then I could identify 1,000 others. But I have this, innate sense of, I will not stand for this because I know what it's like for myself. And I think everybody has those moments in their life. And, it's hard to choose a life that's totally dedicated to human rights around the world and all that kind of stuff. But for me personally, it was the most meaningful, choice I could make. And as I get older, the depth of my understanding and conviction of the underlying unity of all life has never been stronger, and it just continues to grow.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that, Scott. That sort of triggered quite a lot for me just listening to you there. The work that I've been doing both at an individual level, but also at an organizational level for the last 30 plus years of seeing how profound suffering can impact on people and how much integrity people can draw out of that suffering. I've seen people, just performing the most profound acts of kindness and compassion, having had so much cruelty dealt out to them in life. And, I've worked with, institutional abuse and, church abuse and domestic violence and, the people who are just marginalized by the world because of the lack of opportunity that's been given to them because they've had the misfortune of being born in a particular place. And yet they draw out these incredible acts of kindness, these incredible acts of compassion and integrity. Uh, it's always frustrated me that as a civilization, as a collection of cultures, that we don't actually recognise the opportunities in front of us, and that instead, we allow this kind of cruelty to perpetuate. So that's been sort of probably the most important thing for me. Just conscious now that we've come to the end of time, and perhaps, Jordan, you might want to share a slide, how people can link up to the course, how they can get more information regarding the course.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've got on the screen here the website down the bottom, as well as our email address. So, you can book in for the course through a link on the website, or reach out to us if you have any questions at our email address. You'll also see a discount code on the screen. So if you type that code in as you're buying your ticket, then you'll receive a discount as well. So that's all from us. Thank you so much for your time, your attention. And we really do hope that you'll join us on this upcoming course and exploring these really big topics. And we feel confident that you'll leave the course with much more hope and also really clear actions that you can take to help build this brighter future for all of us. So thank you so much, and take care.
Thanks, everyone.